Good morning. In our last class, we have discussed about structure and functions of the ear, in which we have studied how the sound waves they enter into the ear. Through external ear, they enter into the middle ear, and through middle ear, they enter into the internal ear. Acoustic energy or sound energy is converted into mechanical energy into the middle ear, and this mechanical energy, it sets the fluid into vibration in the internal ear, or you can say into the cochlea, and then hair cells which are present on the basilar membrane. So once the basilar membrane, it sets into vibrations, then hair cells are stimulated and there is generation of receptor potential. So now here the electrical energy will be generated and it will be transmitted in the form of impulse to the central nervous system. So acoustic energy, it gets converted into the mechanical energy. This mechanical energy is then converted into, it sets the fluid into the internal ear in vibrations, and ultimately it gets converted into electrical energy, which in the form of impulse is transmitted to the central nervous system. So what happens after the hair cells, they are stimulated? So today we'll be discussing about the electrophysiology of hearing and how the receptor potential is developed, and this receptor potential will be then transmitted to the central nervous system through auditory pathway. Now this slide, it shows the structure of organ of Corti, which has already been discussed. So organ of Corti, it consists of hair cells. So the receptors for hearing are the hair cells present in the organ of Corti, and as we have already discussed that there is single row of internal hair cells and 3 to 4 rows of outer hair cells. Okay. Then upper end of these hair cells, they are fixed into the rigid reticular plate, which reticular lamina. This arrow should extend up to here. This is reticular lamina. This reticular lamina is supported by 2 rods of Corti, and this 2 rods of space in between the 2 rods of Corti is known as tunnel of Corti. Now these 2 rods of Corti are supported, or they are placed on the surface of the basilar membrane. This is the basilar membrane. It divides the tube of the cochlea into scala media and scala tympani. As you all know that the tube or structure of the cochlea, it is divided into 3 parts by the 2 membrane, Risner's membrane and basilar membrane, into scala vestibula, scala media and scala tympani. So scala tympani and scala media, they are filled with the perilymph, and scala media is filled with the endolymph. Composition of these 2, endolymph and perilymph, are different. As I have already told you that perilymph, its composition is similar to that of the extracellular fluid. It is rich in sodium and low in potassium ions. Whereas scala media, it contains endolymph, and this endolymph, composition of the endolymph is similar to that of the intracellular fluid. It is rich in potassium ion and low in sodium ion. So these are the hair cells. There are about 100 stereocilia which project from the upper portion of the hair cells. So these hair, they are about 100 in number, and there is gradual increase in the size, or you can say length, of the hair cells. From the modulus, away from the modulus, there is increase in the length of the hair, and or you can say stereocilia, and the largest of the stereocilia is known as kinocilium. So when the movement of the other stereocilia is towards the kinocilium, it results into depolarization, and when the hair cells, they move away from the direction of kinocilium, there is hyperpolarization. So how this depolarization and hyperpolarization takes place? Here I would like to remind you that the upper portion or the tip of the stereocilia, they are embedded in the gelatinous coat which is known as tectorial membrane. when the basilar membrane, it moves in an upward direction, it causes movement of the reticular plate upwards and inwards. And when the basilar membrane, it moves in downward direction, it causes movement of reticular lamina outwards and downwards. So this movement of the reticular plate forward and backward, it causes the shear forces between the tectorial membrane and the reticular lamina, and it sets cochlear fluid into vibrations, and movement of fluid will take place, as a result of which there would be bending of the hair cells. So when the bending of the hair cells takes place in the direction of kinocilium, it results into depolarization, and when movement of the hair cells takes place away from the kinocilium, it results into hyperpolarization. So now how this depolarization and hyperpolarization takes place. When we were discussing regarding the structure of hair cell, I have already told you that tip of the stereocilia. These are the stereocilia and this is the kinocilium. The tip of these cilia, they are connected with each other through a very fine ligaments. So whenever there is movement of the cilia towards the direction of kinocilium, then there would be uprooting of these filaments and it will cause opening of the potassium channels. So potassium, or you can say cation channels, as a result of which potassium and calcium ions, they will enter into the hair cells. So whenever there is movement of the stereocilia in the direction of the kinocilium, there would be uprooting of these filaments which attach to the tip of the hair cells. When these filaments, they are tipped off, then it causes opening of the positively charged channel, as a result of which potassium and calcium will enter into the hair cell, increasing positivity inside the hair cell, resulting into depolarization. When the movement is in the opposite direction, these channel ion will not open and it will result into hyperpolarization. Now, this slide, it shows the hair cell and the nerve with which it synapses. So these base of the hair cells, they synapse with the network of the nerve fibers arising from the 8th cranial nerve. Here you can see that during the resting stage also there is firing from these hair cells, resulting into basal rate of discharge. So this is known as resting discharge. Whenever the hair cells, they will move in the direction of kinocilium, it results into depolarization, or you can say excitation of the hair cell. When excitation of the hair cell takes place, then it causes increase in the firing through the nerve fibers, and this impulse will be then transmitted to the central nervous system. Then again, when it comes back to its normal position, firing will decrease and it will come to the basal level. And when it moves in opposite direction, it will result into hyperpolarization. There will be decreased frequency of impulse transmission through the nerve fiber. So there would be development of alternate receptor potential in the nerve fiber, and this potential in the form of receptor potential in the form of impulse will be transmitted to the central nervous system through the 8th cranial nerve. Once the receptor potential is developed, it is through the neurotransmitter that is known as glutamic acid or glutamate. Now, as I have already told you that cochlea, it is divided into 3, and scala vestibula and scala tympani, it contains perilymph, and its composition is similar to that of the extracellular fluid, and endolymph is present in the scala media, which is rich in potassium and low in sodium. So this is the diagram scala media, scala vestibula, and scala tympani, which are filled with the fluid. And you can see that perilymph, it contains sodium chloride, and endolymph, it is rich in potassium. This endolymph is secreted by the stria vascularis. This is the stria vascularis, which is present on the outer wall of the cochlea. So this stria vascularis, it has got high sodium potassium ATPase activity, and it contains sodium channels through which the sodium is transported into the scala media. That's why the concentration of potassium ion in scala media is more. Now these potassium ions, they were circulated from the perilymph, they enter into the stria vascularis, and from stria vascularis, they will enter into the scala media. Now what is this plus 80 millivolts? The potential, electrical potential always exists between the perilymph and the endolymph, and this electrical of plus 80 microvolts is known as endocochlear potential. So you can say that the electrical potential difference of about plus 80 millivolts always exists between the perilymph and the endolymph, and this potential difference is known as endocochlear potential, with positivity inside the scala media because of the presence of large amount of potassium ions. So here you can see this is the endocochlear potential of plus 80 millivolts, which is present in the scala media. And what is the importance of endocochlear potential? This endocochlear potential, it makes hair cells highly sensitive to the slightest sound. Now this is the diagram of hair cells. Again, it is showing how the receptor potential it develops. Now the tip links of the stereocilia, they get uprooted. Potassium, it enters into the hair cells, resulting into depolarization. Process of depolarization is same. Wave of depolarization travels along the membrane. It causes opening of calcium channels. Calcium channels will enter into the hair cells, and it will cause release of neurotransmitter from the vesicle into the synapse, and this will then cause activation of the nerve fibers at the base of the hair cells. So what is the resting membrane potential of the hair cells? Resting membrane potential of the hair cells, it is recorded to be about 70 millivolts with respect to perilymph, and this minus sign is inside the hair cells. Negativity is inside the hair cells. Now, resting membrane potential of hair cell is minus 70 with respect to perilymph, and minus 150 millivolts with respect to endolymph. How this 150 comes? Minus 70 minus plus 80, it comes out to be minus 150. So this minus 150 millivolts of the potential, it exists at the upper end of the hair cells. Stereocilia, they project into the endolymph. So tip of the hair cells, they are bathed with the endolymph, and basilar membrane, it is permeable to perilymph. So perilymph, it enters through the basilar membrane, and it bathes the basilar portion of the hair cells. So basilar portion of the hair cells is bathed by the perilymph, and the tip of the hair cells, or you can say hair cells, they are projected into the scala media, and they are bathed by the endolymph. So this difference in the endocochlear potential, or the tip of the hair cells, resting membrane potential in the hair cells at the tip is about minus 150 millivolts with respect to endolymph. It makes tip of the hair cells very sensitive, and they can detect even the slightest of the sound. Now the hair cells, as I have already told you, that the base of the cochlea, hair cells present at the base of the cochlea, they are very sensitive in detecting the high-pitched sound. Hair cells present at the apex of the cochlea, they are very sensitive to low-pitched sound. Now this is the innervation of the hair cells. This I have already told you. I am showing the diagram here. Base of the hair cells, they are innervated by the network of nerve fiber from the 8th cranial nerve, which arises from the spiral ganglion, which is present in the organ of corti modulus of the cochlea. 95% of the innervation is to the inner hair cells and 5% is to the outer hair cells. Inner hair cells, they detect, or their function is perception of sound, and outer hair cells, they control the functioning of the inner hair cells. Now, outer hair cells also receive the efferent connection from the superior olivary nucleus, and these fibers are inhibitory and they secrete acetylcholine. Now, once the signal or the receptor potential is generated, then these signals will be transmitted through the 8th cranial nerve to the central nervous system. So what is the pathway? Now the first order neuron, it lies in the spiral ganglion. Fibers which synapse at the base of the hair cells, they enter into the ganglion of corti, which is present in the modulus of the cochlea. From here, the fibers will move to cochlear nucleus, dorsal and ventral cochlear nucleus. Then signals will be transmitted to the superior olivary nucleus. From superior olivary nucleus, signals will be sent through the lateral lemniscus, nucleus of lateral lemniscus. From there, fibers will go to inferior colliculus. From inferior colliculus, signals will be transmitted to the medial geniculate body, and from the medial geniculate body, signals will be transmitted to the primary auditory cortex. So, unlike other pathway, auditory pathway is a 5-neuron pathway. First order neuron lies in the spiral ganglion, second in the cochlear nucleus, third order neuron in the superior olivary complex, fourth order is in the inferior colliculus, and fifth is in the medial geniculate body. Now, this slide shows the pathway, auditory pathway. Fibers arising from the spiral ganglion through the auditory nerve, they carry sensations to the dorsal and ventral cochlear nucleus of the same side. Okay, here the fibers will terminate and second order neuron will arise. So fibers arising from these dorsal and ventral cochlear nucleus, they will innervate the superior olivary nucleus. Some of the fibers will terminate in the superior olivary nucleus of the same side, and most of the fibers, they will cross to the superior olivary nucleus of the other side through the trapezoid body. These are the trapezoid body. So as you all know, crossing of the fibers take place in the second order neuron. So first order neuron, it lies in the spiral ganglion, from where signals are transmitted to the dorsal and ventral cochlear nucleus. From here, second order neuron will arise, which will cross to the opposite side through the trapezoid body. Most of the fibers will cross and they will terminate in the superior olivary nucleus of the opposite side. Some of the fibers into the superior olivary nucleus of the same side. Once the fibers, they terminate or synapse with the neurons which are present in the superior olivary nucleus, then the fibers will arise and they will travel through the lateral lemniscus. This is lateral lemniscus to reach the nucleus of lateral lemniscus, which is not shown here. Only few of the fibers will terminate into the nucleus of lateral lemniscus. Most of the fibers, they will not be relayed in the nucleus of lateral lemniscus, and they will pass the signals to inferior colliculus. Here, almost all the fibers will be relayed in the nucleus of inferior colliculus. From here, the fibers will arise and they will carry signals to medial geniculate body. From the medial geniculate body, fifth order neurons will arise and they will carry signals to the primary auditory cortex through the auditory radiations. So the fibers, or you can say signals, are projected through the auditory radiations from the medial geniculate body into the primary auditory cortex. Now, what is the characteristics of the auditory pathway? First, it is a 5-neuron pathway. Then second, there is bilateral representation on both the sides of the brain. This bilateral representation is because of the crossing over of the fibers, and this crossing over of the fibers, it takes place at the trapezoid body. Then second crossing, it takes place through the commissure of proboscis at the nucleus of lateral lemniscus, and third crossing of fibers takes place between the commissure which is connecting to inferior colliculi. Then superior olivary nucleus, it will send inhibitory impulses to the efferent fibers to the hair cells, and the inferior colliculus, it acts as a center for the auditory reflex. Besides that, the third characteristics of the auditory pathway is spatial orientation throughout the pathway is seen for frequency discrimination, loudness, and direction of sound. This spatial orientation, it begins right from the level of cochlea. So 3 spatial representation is seen in cochlea, 2 in inferior colliculus, 1 in the primary auditory area, and 5 maps, you can see they are seen in the auditory association area. So discrimination begins right from the level of cochlear nucleus. Now, primary auditory cortex. The fibers, auditory radiations, they terminate in the primary auditory cortex, which is area 41 present in the superior temporal gyrus, and some of the fibers, they will terminate in the insular cortex and parietal operculum. Function of the primary auditory cortex is perception of sound. Further analysis will take place in the secondary auditory cortex. Signals from the primary auditory cortex will be sent to the secondary auditory cortex, where further analysis of information will take place. And this auditory association area is area 22, 21, and 20. 22 is located in the superior temporal gyrus, 21 in the middle temporal gyrus, and 20 is the inferior temporal gyrus. You must have already studied in anatomy. So this is the diagram showing different areas, temporal gyrus. This is the primary auditory area, and these are the secondary auditory areas. And area 22 is also known as Wernicke's area. You all know what is the importance of Wernicke's area. It is required for comprehension of written and spoken words. For understanding the speech, you require Wernicke's area. Now, what are the functions of primary auditory cortex? Primary auditory cortex, it perceives sound, it determines the loudness, pitch, source, and direction of the sound. And auditory association area is responsible for interpretation of the sound and to understand the meaning of the sound which is heard by the person. And I have already told you what is the function of Wernicke's area, and functions of the area 20 and 21 is interpretation and integration of auditory impulses. Now, this hearing sensation is very much developed in the lower animals and in human beings also. if you have seen some blind person, so when one sense is lost, other sensations, they develop to a greater extent. A person who is not able to see, in those person, hearing sensations are very much developed. In musicians also, you must have, it has been studied that the auditory area, they are much larger in the musicians as compared to non-musicians. So this condition is known as plasticity. Now, besides primary and secondary auditory area, some few of the fibers, they enter into the reticular activating system, and from the reticular activating system, signals are sent to central nervous system, that is cerebellar cortex, and to the spinal cord, which will alert entire nervous system in response to loud sound. Besides that, signals are also sent to cerebellum, which will help in maintaining the balance. When a person hears a loud sound, then he will just move away, but still he will not fall, he or she will not fall, but balance will be maintained. Now, auditory cortex. Mapping has been done in the auditory cortex. 6 tonotypic maps are seen in primary and secondary auditory cortex, and each map will respond to different qualities of sound like pitch, loudness, direction, and source of the sound. It has been said that the low frequency sounds will cause stimulation of the neurons which are present in the anterior portion of the map, and high frequency sound will cause stimulation of the neurons which are present posteriorly. Now, sharpening of the frequency of the sound is determined by the lateral inhibition, which you have already studied. What is lateral inhibition? Now, once the information, it reaches the brain, all the signals, they reach the brain, then how processing of auditory information takes place? There is encoding of the information. So, encoding of frequency, encoding of intensity and loudness of the sound, and how to determine the direction and localization of the sound. This is all carried by the central nervous system, which is known as neural processing. So how determination of frequency is done? I have already explained it to you in my last lecture, what is place theory and what is Wolle's principle. Determination of the frequency of various frequency of the sound, or you can say discrimination of different frequencies of the sound, it is determined by the place theory. According to place theory, maximum vibration of the sound, or once the sound enters into the internal ear, initially it is slow to begin, and then amplitude of the sound, it increases as it reaches that portion of basilar membrane whose natural resonant frequency is similar to that of the sound wave which enters into the ear. So at that time there would be maximum displacement of the basilar membrane in that portion, and the signals will be transmitted by these specific nerves, and it will cause excitation of specific neurons in the central nervous system, which will apprise the central nervous system of the frequency of the sound that is entering into the ear. Now, here you can see the diagram. This diagram, I have already explained it to you, and this shows the place theory for determination of the frequency of the sound. Now this shows this slide, it shows the diagram of the cochlea, and base of the cochlea, it will detect the high frequency sound from about 20,000 hertz, and there is gradual decrease in the frequency of sound that will be discriminated by the different portion of the cochlea. As you move towards the apex, you will see that pitch of the sound, it decreases, and it lowest frequency of the sound will be detected by the basilar membrane which is present at the apex of the cochlea. So till 200 Hz frequency, it will be detected by the apex of the basilar membrane, or you can say hair cells which are present on the basilar membrane of the cochlea near the apex. They will detect, or they will be stimulated by low frequency of the sounds. So up to 200, from 20,000 to 200 Hertz, this frequency will be determined by the place theory, and from 200 Hertz to 20 Hertz, that is very low frequency sounds, will be determined by the Wolle's principle. So this is Wolle's principle. Very low frequency of the sound is synchronization between the frequency of sound and the rate of discharge through the cochlear nerve. So for very low frequency of sounds, there is synchronization between the frequency of sound and rate of discharge through the cochlear nerves. So by Wolle's principle, a person can discriminate frequencies of sounds from 20 to 20,000 Hertz. Now, how the loudness of the sound is encoded. Loudness is determined by the amplitude of movement of the basilar membrane. If the sound is loud, amplitude of vibration of the hair cells and basilar membrane will be more, resulting in increased rate of impulse through the cochlear nerve. So second method by which loudness is detected is more the loudness of the sound, more will be the amplitude, and once the amplitude of the vibrations of the basilar membrane is more, more and more excitation of the hair cells, as a result of which there will be spatial summation of impulses and more nerve fibers are stimulated, carrying increased signals to central nervous system. Now the third method by which the central nervous system will detect the loudness of sound is there are certain neurons which will be stimulated only by very loud sounds. So once these neurons are activated, central nervous system, it comes to know that sound is very loud. Now, how the direction of sound is determined. How the person is able to detect the direction of sound, whether the sound is coming from the front, or it is coming from the back, or it is coming from the right side, or it is coming from the left side of the person. If the person is standing and the sound is coming right from the front, then there will be no time lag. So there are two methods by which detection of sound is done. One is by the mechanism of time lag between the entry of sounds entering into the 2 ears. That means there will be difference in the entry of sound in the 2 ears. If suppose the source of sound is present near the left ear, then the sound entering into the left ear will be, sound entering the left ear will reach the central nervous system ahead as compared to the sound entering through the right ear. Similarly, if the source of sound is closer to the right ear, then the sound will enter and it will cause stimulation of the neurons, and the signals from the right side will be transmitted earlier as compared to left side. So detection of direction of sound, it takes place by two mechanisms. One is the time lag between the entry of sound in 2 ears, and this is sensitive in detecting the frequency of sound below 3000 Hertz. Then another method by which the direction of sound is determined is by difference between the intensities of sound in 2 ears. And this method is sensitive for detecting the direction of high frequency sounds. So what is the mechanism? And it has been said that time lag mechanism is more appropriate for detecting the frequency of sounds as compared to detecting the direction of sound by comparing the difference in the intensities of the sound. So once this discrimination, direction discrimination or determination of the direction of the sound, it begins right from the level of superior olivary nucleus. This superior olivary nucleus, it begins the differentiation of the or determining the direction of the sound. It begins at the level of superior olivary nucleus, and from here the signals are transmitted through the auditory pathway to the cortex. Now, superior olivary nucleus, it is again divided into two: lateral superior olivary nucleus and medial superior olivary nucleus. Lateral superior olivary nucleus, it determines the direction by comparing the difference in intensity of the sounds entering into the 2 ears. And the medial superior olivary nucleus, it detects the direction of the sound by time lag mechanism between the entry of sound into the 2 ears. So this medial superior olivary nucleus, it has got a special characteristics. It has got two dendrites. Each neuron present in the medial superior olivary nucleus, it has got two dendrites, and these dendrites, they project into two directions. One is towards the right and another one is towards the left. So sound coming from the right side of the ear will come and impinge on the right dendrite, and the sound which is coming from the left ear, it will come and impinge on the left dendrite of the medial superior olivary nucleus. Now the neuron will compare the time lag between the entry of the two sounds. Some of the neurons, they will be stimulated by the short time lag. Some of the neurons, they will be stimulated by the long time lag, and some of the neurons will be stimulated by the intermediate time lag. So this sensation will be transmitted through the nerves in the auditory nerve, through the auditory nerve to the primary auditory cortex. So this also follows the Mueller's doctrine of specific nerve energy. It is very helpful in detecting the specific direction and tone of the sound. Now, regarding the summary, we have already studied, or I will just revise in short, that the acoustic energy or the sound waves, they enter through the external auditory meatus, or you can say pinna is responsible for collection of sound waves. Sound waves, they enter through the external auditory meatus. They will strike the tympanic membrane and will set the tympanic membrane into vibration, converting acoustic energy into mechanical energy. Then this mechanical energy will cause movement of the three ossicles present in the middle ear, and the vibrations will be transmitted to the fluid which is present in the cochlea, and this will set the basilar membrane which is present in the internal ear into vibration and will cause stimulation of hair cells. So mechanical energy will be converted into electrical energy, and this electrical energy in the form of impulse will be transmitted through the auditory nerves to the brain, where interpretation of the sound will take place. So this was all regarding the electrophysiology, how the receptor potential is developed. Then you should know what is endocochlear potential. Then you should know about auditory pathway, what are the characteristics of the auditory pathway, and how there is determination of the sound, frequency and direction it takes place at the level of central nervous system. So next time we will study about the applied aspect, that is deafness, different types of deafness, and brainstem auditory evoked potentials. So thank you for today.